Hi, everybody. This is Jimmy. You're reading with Jimmy. We're doing the summary background and interpretation of Hamlet, Act 5. Hopefully, you read it with me. Hopefully, this is a wonderful depiction of what the Hamlet. It's really unbelievable. What an ending. Here's what happened. In scene 5, the clowns are in the graveyard digging Ophelia's grave. Remember, she fell off the bark of a tree. And they come across Yorick, who Hamlet remembers. Last poor Yorick, remember? Ophelia's body is brought in. Laertes jumps into her grave. Hamlet follows him into her grave. They fight, they pull apart, and they exit. All of that happens in scene 1, and there's some great dialogue that happened. Hopefully you got a lot out of that when the clowns. Now, these are not bozo clowns. These are just peasants. But these people are very smart. They're like the court jester. They used to say the fool in a play is basically the smartest guy in the room. And if you remember reading some of the exchanges, remember throughout the play, these people are word fencing. That's all they had to do in those days is fence words. They use words and double, triple entendres, right? In scene 2, Hamlet tells Horatio what happened with the sealed order to kill him and how he reversed those orders and rewrote them to kill Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. And that's another thing that if you're thinking about, this guy's a sharp guy, Hamlet, right? He finds out or he figures out, is it luck that he opened those orders? Well, he did. And Orsic shows up to invite Hamlet to participate in fencing with Laertes because the king bet there's a wager involved. Everyone shows up for the event. The king and Laertes plotted with poison, if you remember, to kill Hamlet by the sword tipped with poison or with the wine that Hamlet drinks. So during the bout, Gertrude drinks from the poison wine glass. Hamlet's sweating. She wants a wipe of, use her kerchief to wipe him off, dry his head, take a drink. He doesn't want to drink. She drinks. And even though the king shouts, don't drink, it's too late. She drinks it, of course, and it's poison. Then they fence some more, and then eventually Laertes stabs Hamlet. They have a little struggle, and Hamlet switches swords. They drop their swords. Perhaps they're fighting. Whatever. You can use your imagination for that. You don't have to listen to what people said in the notes about how Hamlet ended up with Laertes' sword. But in any case, he gets his sword, and then he stabs Laertes with the poisoned sword. So Laertes poisoned Hamlet. Hamlet poisoned Laertes. And then the queen passes out, and Hamlet and the queen. So when the queen passes out, Laertes tells Hamlet, of course, you'll remember that it was the king who did all this. So Hamlet stabs the king and the queen and Laertes, they all die, including Hamlet. Fortinbras shows up after Hamlet dies and the bodies are carried away. Good night, sweet prince. Wow. Huh? So remember, the plot, according to Aristotle, is the most important thing, and now we have the culmination of the plot. This is the ending. This is where all the roads in the first 4 acts lead to, is this culmination of death. The best summary of what happened is by Horatio at the end after Hamlet dies and Fortinbras shows up, and I want to talk about that for a moment. So Horatio, because remember, Hamlet says, tell everybody what happened. You know what happened. He goes, let me speak to the yet unknowing world how these things came about. So shall you hear. So he's going to basically recite the play again, but we're not going to stick around for it because we already read the play. You shall hear of carnal, bloody, and unnatural acts, of accidental judgments and casual slaughters, of deaths put on by cunning and forced cause, and in the upshot, purpose mistook, fallen on the inventor's reeds. All of this I can truly deliver. So let's discuss this for a moment. Of carnal, bloody, unnatural acts. Carnal means relating to the physical and especially sexual needs and activities. And this is referencing the queen's marriage to her husband's brother, carnal. Bloody has a couple of definitions, covered or smeared with running blood, or involving or characterized by bloodshed or cruelty. And the play started out with a ghost who was poisoned by his brother, and then Polonius, who was stabbed. And then the final scene is really death-ridden with blood and bloody, since both Laertes and Hamlet are bleeding. You know, they weren't fencing with just a touch, a tap. They stabbed each other. Laertes stabbed Hamlet. Hamlet got ticked off, and stabbed Laertes. So they're bleeding. This is not just a tap. Unnatural acts. What's unnatural? Contrary to the ordinary course of nature. Don't you hate that? Abnormal. Don't you hate that when they define words with words? The ghost isn't natural. And we could argue marrying your brother's wife is not natural. But we don't, I'm sure there's plenty of that happened in the world. But certainly unnatural is really referring to the ghost, who's normally not natural, correct? So these are the three adjective modifying acts: carnal, bloody, unnatural acts. These are three adjectives. And if you remember, Jimmy said, beware of adjectives. Remember when he said that in one of the prior discussions? Well, beware of them, but be aware of them. Not beware, but be aware. The acts in the play are Gertrude marrying Claudius. These are the acts. What acts? Gertrude marrying Claudius, Hamlet killing Polonius, the king ordering Hamlet set in England, the fencing contest, etc. All of the acts in this play of 5 acts, I'm not being funny. Yes, I am. Carnal, bloody, and unnatural. Really the stuff that Hamlet's made of. Take the next line of accidental judgments and casual slaughters. Accidental means happening by chance, unintentionally and unexpectedly, right? It's an adjective modifying judgments, which relates to Hamlet's accidental judgments in his mother room when he kills Polonius. That's an accidental judgment. Would you agree with that? Accidental judgment could be Polonius misinterpreting Hamlet's madness as really the result of unrequited love. Accidental judgments. What are the non-accidental judgments? What are the judgments not by accident? Casual slaughters can modify slaughters, which means relaxed or unconcerned, an indication of Hamlet's switching the sealed orders, right? That was a casual slaughter. Also, the reference to the battle between Fortinbras and the Polish is a casual slaughter. They treat it casually. Of deaths put on by cunning and forced cause. Certainly refers to the king's plots with Laertes, right? Forced, obtained or imposed by coercion or physical power, used as an adjective modifying cause. Forced cause. It means a person or thing that gives rise to an action, phenomena, condition. A verb cause, the verb cause means make it happen. So this means deaths from cunning or having to show the skill in one's end up in deceit, which certainly fits the ending of this act. Of deaths brought on, put on, caused, right? By cunning and forced cause. Forced cause is Hamlet being ordered by his father to kill Claudius, right? That's a forced cause. He does. Act 1, I'm telling you, go kill my brother. He killed me. Cunning, Laertes plotting with the king, etc. Hamlet is a complex plot. Because it has reversal, recognition, and catharsis. And you can look those up when you study Aristotle's Poetics. That's where this comes from. So this is now compare what you just read in Hamlet to some of the crap on television. I say crap with due respect, because there's not a lot of complex plots or character development on some of the things you watch on television. A lot of it is predictable and, quite frankly, boring. So, well, Jimmy, I thought this Hamlet was pretty boring, but I stuck with you. Some of the emails I got said that they can't get into it. We're going to talk about some of the emails I got later on. But in this case, if you can't get into it, that's not my fault. That's not the writer's fault. That's your fault. You got to make it. You remember, I told you in the beginning, Shakespeare ain't going to come to you. You got to go to Shakespeare. You got to bend to Shakespeare. And as you do that, you're going to learn the complexity of plot. You're going to become a better judge of plot. You're going to realize that people are not one way or, they're not simple. They're complex. There's lots of things going on in people you and I don't know, in ourselves sometimes. Why did I do that? Did you ever say that to yourself? So Hamlet is a complex, it starts out at the peak of his glory, right? The play begins. He's the heir apparent. He's the heir apparent. But then immediately, because of the ghost, Hamlet's fortune is reversed. He's now tasked with revenge. This is not due only to the ghost, but to his fatal error in judgment when he kills Polonius. That's an error. Some people, it's a forced error. No, well, who forced it? His passion, right? Since the hero of a tragedy is a person of noble status, that's what Aristotle says. This sudden reversal in his status creates an ironic twist. It's a sad thing, right? As the play progresses, there is a recognition of the true identities or a shift from ignorance to knowledge, making people aware of his hidden truth or true identities. As the play goes on, you start to see Hamlet is revealed. Not that he's, schizophrenic and has multiple identities, but he's really a complex character. And we find out the truth is that basically he's being changed. And the reversal, recognition, result in suffering by arousing the feelings of pity and fear. Did you feel pity when you read the play with me? Did you feel fear when you read the play with me? Not just for Hamlet, but for other characters, like Ophelia. If you didn't feel pity and fear for Ophelia, then maybe you should reread the play. Maybe you should rethink what you're looking at. You understand? Maybe you should. Pity and fear is what you do. Well, Jimmy, fear is different. Why would I want to be afraid? Well, because sometimes when you read great literature, you see yourself in that literature, and then suddenly that makes you afraid. Why? Do you want to be like Claudius? A jerk? I'm just saying. Pity on the sad plight of Hamlet. You feel pity for this guy. I mean, think about it. I mean, this guy, from the beginning, after he comes in, he's just so sad. His uncle mocks him. You remember that scene? That really terrific scene where his uncle just didn't have any empathy for him. And then he goes through the rest of the play just acting nuts while he's trying to figure out how he's going to do what the ghost asked him. And fear at the anxiety of the thought whether that fate of the tragic hero would befall us. What if you were tasked with doing something like this? Well, what if you're tasked with doing something not like this, but like this? What do you mean, Jimmy? That's a contradiction. No, sometimes we're all tasked with doing things we don't like. Or do you always do the tasks that are given to you and you like what you do? Are you that fortunate and blessed that you always do what you have to do and need to do and you enjoy it? I don't know. That's an interesting thought. The fate of the tragic hero would befall us. You have to do this. And it's not going to turn out well. Can you think of anything like that? I don't know. According to Aristotle, suffering undergone by the audience while watching a tragic play is the greatest merit of good tragedy. And it decides the true value of the play, right? The true value of the play. Catharsis, very important words. Let's memorize it. Catharsis, a feeling of catharsis. Okay. Catharsis is the purgation of the emotions, especially pity and fear, primarily through art. In criticism, catharsis is a metaphor used by Aristotle in the Poetics to describe the effects of true tragedy on the spectator. You understand? Catharsis. It's like a purgation, purging of the emotions. Okay? Questions? Jimmy at Reading with Jimmy. Questions? Reading with Jimmy. Okay? Character. Character is the second most important thing to plot in the organization of tragedy's elements, which is what we talked about, since the beginning of our analysis. And in Act 5, we learn about each of these characters through their dialogue and actions. And this is important in determining the reliability of the actors. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And can you summarize? This is third-person narration. We know that. Hamlet is a drama, so it's being told to us by the actors on stage in a third-person point of view. Therefore, each character, as reported in the dialogue, can be reliable or not. Each character can be reliable or not. We determine reliability by noting contradictions in their actions. That's what we have to do. We got to be good observers. We call that in real life hypocrites when a person says something and does something else, right? That's not what we're looking for here, although it kind of is. For example, at the beginning, when Hamlet first comes on stage, he's sad. And his mother asks him why, and Hamlet's, talks about seeming or being sad. Being or you really are. Remember? Here's the scene. Why seem it so particular? Why are you so sad? Seems, madam? No, it's not seems. See? It's not seems. 'Tis not alone my inky cloak, good mother, nor customary suits of solemn black. I'm not just wearing black. I'm not doing this. I'm really, really sad. I have that within which passeth show. These but the trappings are the suits of woe. Isn't that beautiful? He's really feeling hurt. And then, of course, Claudius comes in and just belittles Hamlet. Well, it's commendable to your nature, Hamlet, that you're doing this, but you must know your father lost a father, and that father lost his, and survivor bound and Ophelia, blah, blah, blah. And basically, this is kind of like an unmanly grief. You're basically being a wimp. When I read this passage, I want to pop this guy. Hamlet is suffering, ladies and gentlemen, and this guy just talks like this to him. For your intent in going back to school, it is most retrogradable to our desire. It doesn't want him to go back. We want you to stay here, but remain here, and cheer and comfort in our eyes. In other words, don't go back to school. Stay here with us. This little exchange helps to find not only reliability, but gives us insight into the king's character. He's a jerk. He's really a jerk. Now, he doesn't know, Hamlet doesn't know yet that the ghost is going to tell him that this jerk killed his father. That's beside the point. This whole speech shows you he's a jerk, being a jerk, right? Part of your interpretation includes judgments you'll make about the reliability of these people. And if you see contradictions, reliability has to be challenged. So let's judge their reliability, right, for a little bit. Claudius. Is Claudius reliable? Well, Jimmy, he's really reliable because he's a jerk, and everything he does is really to plot and kill. And, so he's pretty consistent in that. But is he a reliable narrator? I don't think so. First of all, he's a coward. He killed a guy. He never talks about it. He never tells. We don't know in the evidence of the play that he ever tells Gertrude he killed her husband. He just marries her. And we know why he marries her, because Hamlet's not there and he wants the king. He wants to become the king while Hamlet's not there, because Hamlet, if he came back, would have been the king. Is Hamlet a reliable narrator? I would say what he says is pretty reliable. He acts like a nut sometimes. He's passionate. He jumps into the grave and fights with Laertes, but is he reliable? Yeah, he's pretty reliable. Polonius reliable? Pretty much so. He's pretty, he's just a nice old guy that wants to help his daughter out because he thinks Hamlet is suffering because of what he told her to do. Horatio? He's reliable. You see there's a pattern floating here because this is third person narration. All these characters in their own right are fairly reliable. Some are less than others. I wouldn't necessarily believe everything Claudius is saying to another character. Why? Well, because he's not really right. When he says, stay around, I want you to stay around, they'll go back to Wittenberg, to Hamlet. Well, I don't know, because Gertrude wants him around, maybe. Maybe he wants to keep him close because he knows what he did to his father. We don't know for sure. But his reliability as a narrator is not as in Hamlet. Well, maybe he's not as reliable either, is he? Because sometimes he tells Ophelia, I never loved you. And yet in Act 5, we know he loved her. He says he loved her. When he's tussling in the grave and at the end of it, he loved Ophelia. He really loved her. So was he just lying in the beginning of it when he told her, and get thee to a nunnery? I don't love you. I never loved you. Or was he doing that just because he had to focus on his revenge? You see, reliability of narration is a complex topic. It has to do with real life. You either believe people what they're telling you or you don't. And how do you believe what people are telling you unless you know for yourself? You have to trust. Trust is a big factor, right? Trust takes a long time to gain and only takes an instant to lose it. Right? Oh, what a tangle. This is not in this play. We weave when first we practice to deceive. So, if you lie once, you're off the grid, right? You just fall down. You can never go back because you lie. Well, if I go to confession, I'm a Catholic, they'll forgive me. Well, maybe God will, but will you forgive yourself? See? Forgiveness is another topic we don't want to talk about. Horatio. He's probably a very reliable narrator, but he doesn't narrate much, except at the end when he sums up the play. Laertes is just full of passion. Is he a reliable narrator? He doesn't know. He plots with the king. He's going to take his revenge. Revenge is a big thing, big thing in this play. We're going to talk about some revenge things later. And so on and so forth. And you can decide the reliability of these people is pretty much up and down, but the play, because it's a third-person narrator, it's not Hamlet telling us the story from within the story. It's not Polonius telling us the story from within the story. Besides, Polonius dies. But it's people outside the story. It's an outside narrator. It's the omniscient, godlike narrator narrating this play to us. He's showing us, the narrator is, what these characters do, what they say, how they act, where they go. He's presenting it to us for our judgment, study, and pleasure. You understand? Final thoughts. I said in the beginning that this is a difficult play, but hopefully if you stuck with me, it became less difficult. It certainly should have. After Act 1, Act 2 should have been easier, 3, 4, and 5. 5 should have been just a piece of cake, right? Because there's just a lot of death, killing. But you also notice from Act 5 the importance of the direction, in parentheses and italics, of the play. You understand what I'm saying? So that re-entering, entering, exit, he dies, those kind of directions are actually telling us what happens, what the people should do. And as you're imagining yourself in the audience 400 years ago watching this play, not having a cell phone, not having a television, not having a radio, not having anything to distract you except words and actions, you could see how really beautiful a play like this would be to an audience who can't read perhaps, but they can certainly listen and hear. And quite frankly, they were probably more educated than we are because the allusions in here to Greek mythology, to the Bible, to history with Alexander the Great, so on, they already knew that. There was oral tradition going on in those stories from the time they were young. They were brought up. When the clown is talking about how long a person will last in a grave because they're pocky, because of the plague. We know we're lucky, right? By the time we were young and grew up, the one thing that was cured when Jimmy was young was polio. Polio was a big fear when Jimmy was young. Oh my God, you're going to get polio, which means you're going to be a cripple. But then they found a vaccine, right? And you took the polio vaccine, which means you didn't get polio. So plague was rampant 400 years ago, right? They didn't have any medicine. They used to use leeches to bleed you. They put a leech on and take your blood out. They think that was a cure. All sorts of stuff, right? So this discussion about what happens when you're in the dirt, when you're in the ground, a tanner lasts longer. This is all entertainment for these people and entertainment for us. Well, Jimmy, why should I be entertained by a guy digging skulls up? Well, there was a cemetery catastrophe one time when they found out that somebody was digging up graves unnecessarily, because supposedly in cemeteries today, there's laws and rules, not like in those days where you dig them up and put another one in. Anyway, everything comes with a practice. So I encourage you to go back and listen again to some of the readings. And the reason I say that is because, like all literature on this website, we select literature that Pound said is language charged with meaning. Shakespeare language, the language of Shakespeare, you cannot substitute modern English for Shakespearean English. You just can't. You could. Don't get me wrong. Well, Jimmy, I can see other people have done it. I just Google it and I get hundreds of hits of people who have translated Shakespeare into something I can understand. Well, good for you. But you're not going to experience Shakespeare. You're experiencing phony Shakespeare. It's not Shakespeare. It's not the same. It's not the original. You got to read the original if you're going to experience it. You got to go to Shakespeare. He's not going to come to you. And Jimmy, I don't have the time to do that. Go ahead. That's fine. Jimmy don't care. This website is for people who want to come to Shakespeare, who want to come to Nathaniel Hawthorne, who want to come to great authors. I'm bringing these authors to you so that you can come to them, because you're not going to do it on your own. I didn't do it on my own. I had great instructors. Besides, you never meet people like this, have you? Have you ever met a person like this? I used to say, well, I met Hamlet in business. I met people who can't make a decision, and it's usually always fatal. And that's the truth. One of the things that is true from literature that Jimmy learned that came from classical literature study is that timing is everything. Some business people learn that the hard way. Some business people never learn that. But timing of an action in business is sometimes more important than the action itself. As in the case of Hamlet. If he would have killed Claudius when he was praying, boom, done, over, revenge, right? But he didn't do it. He made up excuses. I don't want to kill him because he'll go to heaven. Okay. I'm just saying, there's lots of factors. Well, Jimmy, are you saying he should have killed his uncle? I'm not saying he should have killed his uncle. I'm saying that in the context of the Hamlet play, the ghost told him, you got to kill your uncle. That's what I want you to do. Your father gave you an order. Would you do it? If your father told you to do something, would you do it? Well, my father's dead, Jimmy. Well, so is my father. But I assure you, if the ghost of my father appeared to me and told me to do something, I would have to seriously consider it, right? which is why the ghost in the story is a real character. Well, Jimmy, this is just a story. Of course it's a story. But it's a story of people you'll never meet. You may never meet a ghost. Jimmy did. Wasn't a ghost. It was a vision, an angel, actually. You've already met people like this. You may never know the sorrow can do. You may never know what sorrow can do to you. Maybe you're one of the fortunate people in life. You go through life and you never really have sorrow. Sorrow can rip you apart. Sorrow can make you do things that you had no idea you could do. Should do, woulda, coulda, right? Remember? Or you may have realized that the loss of a loved one and totally understand what Hamlet was feeling about the loss of his father before he felt the ghost. Before he felt the ghost, he was despondent. He was sad. And then his uncle mocks him. I remember a bank president conversation about the loss of her father a while ago. She was a VP, and we were on the phone talking, and I hadn't heard from her a while. And she said, I really can't talk to you. But I had called her about an issue. She said, I really can't talk to you now. I said, what's going on? And there was silence. You just heard it in her voice. You know, the phone is one of the most powerful communication tools because you can hear it in her voice. She says, I lost my father last week. And my father was my friend, my everything. And we had a half-hour conversation full of deep emotion from her. I couldn't believe it. And not only that, I realized, having read classical literature, when emotion strikes like that, you have to give people the opportunity to reveal that emotion to you, especially if they choose to. She didn't have to. Maybe she had no control over revealing it. I don't know, but it was there, and there I listened. And it was unbelievable what the sorrow had done to her. Unbelievable. It's something that, I mean, I wrote about it in my diary, but it's something that makes a profound effect on you. And some people don't feel sorrow at all because I don't care. He deserves to die. There's other people like that. I won't mention any names. That one is when, you know, they were happy that the father died. Anyway, her sorrow was not seeming. This was very real, and I think more real than what I felt when my own father died when he was 50 years old. I was sad, but I did not really feel sorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, feelings like that, sorrow or anything, you know, the emotions we talked about, those are gifts. Some people can't feel that. Some people don't feel that. And that's a sad thing. When you cannot feel emotion, that's a sad thing, isn't it? Well, Jimmy, maybe it's not so sad. You know, who needs to feel, you know, this kind of stuff with all this crap going on in the world, right? No. You gotta, if you don't feel, then, like Hamlet said, you're just a beast, right? Right? Our reason helps us feel. We're reasoning animals. Anyway, finally, another motivating force is revenge. Revenge, which means to inflict harm on someone for an injury wrong to yourself or another person. And revenge is as old as time. You know, that's one of the 8 emotions that they don't talk about. Revenge. Revenge. In the Iliad, which is Homer, word of mouth, right? King Jove, he said, grant me revenge on Alexandrus. Revenge. The Iliad, which is the story about the Trojan War, is all about revenge when they stole Helen, right? The Trojans stole Helen. And so the Greeks got the army together and went back to get Helen. They're going to take revenge. We're going to take care of this. It's a great story. And it's one of the first, right? The Odyssey and the Iliad before the Odyssey, is a story about revenge. The Bible has revenge stories in it. From the beginning of revenges upon thy enemy, I will make my arrows drunk with blood. This is King James, by the way. And the sword devour flesh from the beginning of revenges upon my enemy. Lots of revenge. One of the best stories, perhaps Jimmy will read it with you, is the Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. You've probably seen maybe the movie of it. It's been made a movie by Richard Chamberlain and then remade later on, and even earlier. I think Douglas Fairbanks played it in the earlier version. This is about a guy who got arrested and thrown into prison for something he didn't do. And then he escapes and he swears revenge on the three guys who put him in that prison. It's a unbelievable adventure of revenge and story and forgiveness, perhaps. And then there's Moby Dick. Most people don't think of Moby Dick as a revenge story. Well, Jimmy, isn't that a story about a whale? Yep, it is. But it's a story about Ahab who chases the whale because he took his leg. He's going to get even with him. It's a great story of revenge. Horrible, just a horrible tragedy, but great revenge. One of the great lines that is embedded in Jimmy's mind from the Moby Dick. I'd like to read Moby Dick, but I don't know if you can hang in there with me. It's a really thick book. Ahab standing on the deck and they're talking about, revenge and the whale and these other things. And he says, I'd strike the sun if it insulted me. There's a statement of revenge. Can you imagine yourself saying that? I'd strike the sun if it insulted me. Wow. Anyway, that's why understanding motivations in classical literature helps us understand ourselves better. Because remember, especially with revenge, if you're going to do revenge, you better dig two graves. If you start on the road to revenge, your target's grave, and then your own. That's Confucius. So a little bit more about the language. I won't spend too much time on this. This is when he meets Yorick. I'm not going to reread it again, but you can go back and reread it. I knew him well. He was a fellow of infinite jest. He's holding the skull in his hand, reading these lines, alas, poor Yorick. I knew him well. I knew him. A lot of people misquote it. I knew him well. But he was the court jester. And he talks about, here hung those lips that I kissed. And now he's just a skull. And then they break out into talking about if the same thing happened to Alexander. They're talking about, is this where we all end up? If it be not now, it's not to come. If it be not to come, it will be now. If it be not now, and yet it will come, the readiness is all. In other words, it's the woulda, coulda, shoulda, but it's also, if it ain't going to happen, it ain't going to happen. The thing is to be ready. The readiness is all. Be prepared. Boy Scouts used to have that motto, be prepared. Be ready. What should I be ready for, Jimmy? Anything. You have to be ready, which means practice. You have to practice. Practice, practice, practice. You don't think a Navy SEAL becomes a Navy SEAL by just saying, I'm going to be a Navy SEAL. Do you know, Michael Jordan just didn't become Michael Jordan by saying, I'm going to be a good basketball player. Practice, practice, practice. Well, what do you mean? How can I practice? Well, practice. When you feel yourself undergoing an emotion, watch yourself. Why are you acting like you're acting? We all do this. We all lose control. If you say, Jimmy, I never lost control, you know what? I don't believe you. I just don't believe you, because everybody, we're human beings. We lose control. But when you lose control, you have to figure out why you lost control, and then figure out if it's worth losing control again. And if it's not, then you'll never lose control over what you lost control over. That's what he's saying here. Right? Since in my heart there was a kind of fighting, right? Bilbo's rashly in praise. We read this already. Our indiscretion sometimes serves us well. Our indiscretion In my heart there was a kind of fighting that would not let me sleep. Methought I lay worse than the mutinies and the bilboes. Those are those shackles, rashly and praised by rashness for him. Let us know our indiscretion sometimes serve us well. When you're indiscreet, you're not thinking, right? You're indiscreet. That's indiscreet. If you're discreet, you're thinking about what you do. But sometimes indiscretion sometimes serves us well. Dostoevsky said, we're going to read him if we've read one short story already. Sometimes it's just nice to break things. Sometimes you get ticked off enough that it's just nice to break. It's just nice to break things. Right? Have you ever felt like that? And when our deep plots do pale, Paul, and that should teach us there's a divinity that shapes our ends, rough hew them how we will. Sometimes, despite the best laid plans of mice and men, they often go astray, or whatever the hell the quote is. Sometimes don't you feel like we're being guided by something happened despite all our plans, right? I'm not going to get into it here, but that's determinism versus free will, right? You either believe you're in a deterministic universe or that you have the free will to act it. And then sometimes a divinity shapes our end no matter how well we plan. Well, that's called life. There's variables in life. There's things that happen you can't possibly fathom. Isn't that what that there are more things dreamt in your philosophy, Horatio? Remember that line? So we live in a world where we can plan all we want, but sometimes, don't take this the wrong way, it happens, right? It just happens. Not from his mouth had the ability of life to thank you. He never gave a commandment for their death. But since no gave and let me speak in yet unknowing world how these things came about. This is Horatio's last speech. And it's a beautiful speech because it sums up in these few lines the entire play. If you were to say, Jimmy, I'm going to write an essay about this play, right? You would say, of carnal, bloody, unnatural acts, accidental judgments, upshot, mistook, inventors read all I can. This is what happens in here. All these things happen in this play. It's a beautiful play, and I hope you enjoyed it. This is Jimmy. You've been reading with Jimmy. This is the interpretation of the final act and play of Hamlet. Readingwithjimmy.com is the website. Jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com is my email. I want to hear from you. I really want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.